Everybody, you're watching the Mike Nelson Show. I want to thank everybody who's already subscribed to the channel. We have over 400 subscribers around the world. I just want to thank everybody for your support. Today, I got a very special guest. I got a legendary violinist, Darryl Way. How are you doing today, Darryl?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's next week here in the United States. It's Thanksgiving, so it's pretty much like the last. We're gonna be off all next week. A lot of people, so we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, we're going to be celebrating Thanksgiving this year.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, because my daughter's coming over, and she can't come to us for Christmas, so we thought we'd have the celebration on Thanksgiving Day instead. So we're
Nice,
having a turkey on Thanksgiving Day.
nice. Of course, out in England, you guys don't do Thanksgiving, right?
We don't do it, no. It's Christmas, but that's turkey time is Christmas time.
All right, sounds good. So, Darryl, when did your whole musical journey start out? When did you start listening to music? What was your first instrument? When did it all start for you?
Well, I was taught the violin at the age of 8 by my brother, of all people, actually. My mother was very canny. She paid for lessons for my brother to be taught, and he was actually 10 years older than me. So he was 18 when he was teaching me. So she paid for lessons for him to be taught the violin. So she thought, well, he knows how to play it. Now he can teach his little brother to play for free. So my first lessons were with him, and he taught me very well. And that's how I started getting involved in music.
So, violin, I actually play violin as well. Violin was my first instrument, then I moved on to alto sax. So, for you, violin is that your first and only instrument, or did you play anything else?
Yeah, well, I did. Funnily enough, I did a wind instrument as well. I did clarinet.
Okay.
That was only because I had to get into college, and you had to have two instruments. So I started learning the clarinet because there was a clarinet teacher in the school. That was the only reason I started to learn it. But actually, I did enjoy it. But I found after a while that it used to make my thumb ache because you didn't have the little straps in those
No.
days. You had to hold it up, and that really annoyed me because it really affected my violin playing. So when I got to college, I dumped the clarinet and I took up the piano, but I was not very good at the piano, I have to say.
And where did you go to college?
I went to a place called Dartington College of Arts, which is an experimental college in the southwest of England, for 2 years on a preparatory course. And then I went to the Royal College of Music in London.
Now, when you went to college, did you know you wanted to be a professional musician, or you kind of still kind of looking for different things?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'd made my mind up about the age of 15, and that's what I was going to do. It was like a small town thing. People stuck in small towns just want to get the hell out of there. And I was figuring out some way that I could get out of this town. And music seemed the way. And it was in the days when the arts were encouraged, and people were putting money into the arts. So I had the opportunity to get a bursary and a scholarship or whatever it was, to study in London. So yeah, I saw it as a way out to start off with, but obviously at the same time, it was a passion for me as well.
How did you get involved in the rock and roll scene, being a violinist?
That's a good question, actually. Yeah, because there's not a lot of us around.
Not really.
um, yeah, well, I wanted to be in a rock band, and I didn't play the guitar, and I didn't particularly play the piano well. I mean, I played enough; I could play chords, etc. But it seemed to me that it was a niche that needed to be opened up, and that could be opened up. You know, people were, people were playing virtuosic type guitar. You had Jimi Hendrix, you had Clapton. There were all these people sort of kind of shining on their instruments. And I thought it might be an opportunity to maybe introduce the violin into this situation. So first of all, I just basically started copying, guitar licks, etc. But eventually I found my own style of how to play it. But yes, it was an unusual thing. But at the same time, somebody once said to me, in the music business or in any kind of performing arts business, you've got to cut out your competition. So me as a rock violinist, I had very, very little competition, which was great. So I could basically shine without anybody else trying to rub the shine off me, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And but there were other guys at the time. There was Jerry Goodman, who played in the Flock, and then went on to play with John McLaughlin in Mahavishnu Orchestra. There was It's a Beautiful Day, the guy violinist whose name I can't remember quite now. And there was people like Jean-Luc Ponty as well. So there was a few, but only a few. And also there was a violinist in an English band called Family as well, which you don't know about in America.
Also, here in the
Uh,
United States, we have Kansas, of course. Robbie Steinhardt, rest in peace.
yes. Oh,
He was
right.
a
Yeah.
violinist as well, and rock
Um,
violinist.
and also Jefferson Airplane had a violinist intervention, didn't they? Is it?
Yeah, I think they
Uh,
did. Yeah.
yeah. Is that Papa John Creech? I could be wrong on that, but I think it was.
Now, what was your first rock and roll band?
The first band was a band that I put together um, with my friend Francis Monkman, who's a keyboard player. He was at the Royal Academy of Music, and I was at the Royal College, and we bumped into each other one day, and we were both trying to form bands. He had a drummer and a bass player, and I had a keyboard player. So we put the two things together, and we formed a band called Sisyphus, um, trying to do basically prog rock, progressive rock in those days, which lasted for maybe 3 or 4 months before we found a manager who said to us, "Well, I think what you need is a female singer." So we hired Sonia came along. We did some auditions with her, and we really liked the way she sang. And then that eventually turned into Curved Air.
Talk to me about the name of Sisyphus. You were talking about that before we went on the air.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was a strange one to choose because Sisyphus is a character from Greek mythology who was condemned by the gods to push a stone up a hill uh, for the rest of his life, and then to watch it roll down again. So every single minute of his life was pushing the stone up the hill and then watching it roll down again, only for him to have to push it up again. And we were young when we thought of that name, but it does kind of resonate with the life in the. It does kind of resonate with the life in the music business because it is very much up and down, and you get to the top of the hill, and then suddenly things go down again.
Now, this morphed into Curved Air. When did the name change happen? Why did you decide to change the name?
I don't know why we changed the name. I think let's just start again. Just a new image with Sonia. Um, yeah, I can't remember why. It was probably thought that Sisyphus was not a good name for a band, and they were probably right.
Now, in those days, what kind of bands were you guys playing with live in England?
Well, I was just thinking about that. Because in Los Angeles, we played the Hollywood Palladium.
Yeah,
It's still going, isn't
still
it?
there. Yeah, still
Yeah.
open.
We played in the Hollywood Palladium in 1971, and we supported the Doors and Dr. John and the Night Trippers. So it was the Doors, Dr. John and the Night Trippers, and Curved Air. This was, of course, when Jim Morrison wasn't with the Doors. It was after, and they decided that they would start touring again. But it was still great to be playing on the same bill as people like Ray Manzarek um, and Dr. John, and it was great. And I think he was tripping at the time, actually thinking about it backstage. I
Now,
think he
talking
was.
about
Oh, he was.
tripping, yeah, what's
He
up?
was living up to his name.
Now, talking about tripping, you guys toured with Black Sabbath in 1970. Is that right?
We did, yeah. We
How was that?
toured. That was an outrageous tour, and there's lots of stories I could tell you, but none of them would be fit to go on the air, I'm afraid.
It doesn't matter.
Um,
It's internet. There's no censorship here.
oh dear, I don't think I can. Let's put it this way: Ozzy Osbourne definitely lived up to his reputation. Let's put it that way. Um, yeah, but we had a great time with them because we got on really well with the guys. We were on tour for about 6 weeks, I think, in England, mostly in England. Um, and it's a strange combination because Black Sabbath were one of the first really heavy metal bands, and Curved Air was quite a quite a, what's the word? I'm sort of arts orientated progressive rock band. So it was strange that it actually worked, but it did actually work. Um, and we did really well off that tour. Even to Black Sabbath fans, they seemed to find something in what we were doing that was to their liking.
Now, you left the band in 1972. What happened?
What happened? Gosh, 1972. Was it 1972? Blimey.
I believe
Um,
so, 72.
yeah, yeah, right, okay. Yeah, well, I think that yeah, Francis was the other person, the main kind of writer and musical force behind the band. We both had slightly different writing styles, and Francis really wanted to take the band in a more experimental direction, and I wanted to keep it slightly more, in the commercial vein. Um, he decided to leave, and then I thought, well, I would leave as well. Um, I can't remember who left first, but it could have been Francis. But anyway, I thought, well, maybe I would go off and try something else, because in the inexperience of youth, I thought I could do it all over again with another band. But of course, it doesn't work like that. How bands become successful is one of those situations where you maybe have a good band, but it's the doors have got to open, and then the doors have got to open. All the doors have to open sequentially so that you can make that steady path to success. And the second band which I had which is called Wolf, was a good band, has some good players in it. It had John Etheridge on guitar, who went on to play with Stefan Grappelli and Nigel Kennedy and many other bands. And the drummer was Ian Mosley, who now plays with Marillion. So there was a good band, but it just didn't quite take off.
Now, playing in Wolf, did you like playing in that band though?
I loved it, yeah, yeah, because I was doing all the writing, so it was my music. We're doing most of the writing. Let's put it that way. Yeah. No, I enjoyed it because it was great players, great people to work with. But it's one of those situations, as I said, it didn't quite it didn't quite capture the feeling of the music at that time. It was maybe just a little bit too late for what was going on.
Now, you decided to go back to Curvera after this, right?
Yeah.
And how did that come about? Did you just decided how did it come about?
Um, well, this is a many. What this was, what, 76 or 75? I can't remember.
The live album came out in 74, 75, around there.
Okay, yeah, yeah. No, we it's a really, really mundane story, really, because we had a tax bill to pay. So we thought, well, let's do a tour, and then we could pay this off, pay the money off, and that was the reason for getting back together again. But once again, it was fun to do. And we had different players, and of course, at that time, the drummer was replaced. The Our drummer Florian was replaced by Stuart Copeland, who went on to be the former member of the founder member of the Police. So our second incarnation had Stuart on drums and an American bass player and a more kind of rock blues orientated guitarist called Mick Jacks, who was absolutely superb.
Now, Stuart was already in England, and is that how you guys linked up with him?
Um, I linked up with Stuart when he was 17.
Okay.
Um, he was our manager. Miles Copeland was managing Curved Air, and he said, "Well, I've got a younger brother, who plays the drums. Did you want to check him out?" And so we went down into this basement somewhere, and Stuart was there playing the drums, and I was playing the violin. I mean, you can't think of a more odd or curious combination of violin and drums. And we just jammed, all afternoon. And after this jam, I said, "Yeah, this guy can really play. I definitely want to work with him." So we then formed a band, which was called Stark Naked and the Car Thieves. And that was Stuart, the American bass player called Phil Cohen, a guy called George. It wasn't George Thorogood, but I can't quite remember his name now. Um, and we did about 2 or 3 gigs before Curved Air did their reunion tour, and then after the reunion tour, Curved Air wanted to carry on, but Florian didn't. So Florian, the original drummer, didn't. So Stuart stepped in, and we had Stuart for the next 2 or 3 years.
Was the reunion tour hard to do? Were you guys not really getting along then?
We got on fine, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, touring is tough. Touring is always tough, but I don't think there was any, there was no issues in the band. No,
Now,
definitely
the
not.
live album, I think, really captures a really, awesome sound of that live 70s, jam feel. Would you agree with that live album that you guys recorded that it kind of captures, what the band was really all about?
Yeah, I think it does. I personally am not a fan of live albums. It's one of those. I always feel that a live performance is something that is of the moment, and I don't like to be reminded of it because when I'm in the moment, I do crazy things, and I don't particularly. Uh, when I hear live performances, I can hear all the mistakes, and that's what makes me crazy. And I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So live performances are not my favorite cup of tea, I have to say.
Now, talking about perfectionist, you worked with Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull, of course, on Heavy Horses. How was it like working with that band? A lot of
Well,
people have
yes,
talked.
you're
Yeah.
dead right. He was a perfectionist, absolutely.
How was it like working with somebody like that?
It was brilliant. Well, he was a good friend of mine. We toured in America, and we got on. We got on really well, and we used to hang out together when we were back in England together. And he just suggested to come along and just stick some violin down on the Heavy Horses album. Um, he he was very particular about the takes. I mean, I would do take after take, and I thought that I was really nailing it. I thought I'd really got it spot on, but he'd find something that wasn't quite right, and I'd have to do it again. I can't remember how many takes, but it was a lot. Um, but it didn't matter. I mean, whatever he wanted, as far as I was concerned, whatever he wanted and what he was looking for, I would try to come up with. Um, but you can see that his perfectionism shows in his music because of the way it's produced, the way it sounds, the attention to detail. So that's what makes great albums. People paying attention to detail.
Now, did you ever play live with Jethro Tull?
No, I didn't know. No, I
Wasn't any
didn't.
discussions for you to do that then?
Not to my knowledge, but I had the feeling that he might have wanted me to be part of that situation, but at that time I was off doing other things and kind of was moving slightly away from rock music at that time, I think.
Now, let's go back to the kind of the beginning. How did you develop your playing style? Because you playing with rock bands, I assume you kind of have to, as a violinist, it's not the same, just playing classical pieces. How do you think you develop that playing style to fit in with the rock environment?
Um, well, as I said before, I was just listening to the way that the guitarists jammed over things, trying to copy those bends, the scales that they use, the pentatonic with the blue thirds and all those things, plus a few other mixolydian mode, modal music. It basically was off the top of my head. My improvisation was a little bit crazy. It was definitely not strictly blues, that's for sure. So, but it had blues elements in it. And then there was a few licks. It never had any jazz elements because jazz was something which I really found I didn't really get on with. It's a jazz is a very refined and difficult art form, and I thought if I was going to get involved with jazz, I'd have to spend a lot of time trying to get on top of that art form. So I thought, no, I won't spend that time doing it. I will stick with what I'm doing, which is basically rock music and classical music. So I didn't what's the word, investigate jazz, but I admire how people play in the jazz idiom, and it's a fantastic art form, but it wasn't for me.
So, talking about your new album, The Rock Artist Progress, this includes a novel as well. Is that correct?
It is. It does. It's an album and a novel, which are both basically intrinsically linked together. It's the novel is about a young man in London in 1968 who gets seduced by the amazingly vibrant rock music scene in London at that time, and wants to become a rock musician. So and eventually they end up recording an album. I don't want to spoil the story. So what I've done is I've recreated this fictional album that goes with the novel, so that you know what they were doing, what the fictional band Magenta Aura were actually doing.
Now, how was it like making this album? You had some pretty cool names that were on this album. Can you talk about that?
I didn't actually know there are the well. It's a fictional album, and these are the people on the album are fictional people.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
And,
Cool names like the musicians you had, like the musicians
yes,
you had working out on the album. How was that like?
well, no, we. As I'm going to say, I can't really discuss how the album was created because the whole thing is a fiction.
Okay.
It's the novel is a fiction, and also the album is a fiction. But it represents something that was recorded in 1969, and I can't tell you more than that because the album in the novel is a key part of the plot line. So, and if I was to tell you about it, it would be a massive spoiler alert.
Are you happy though with this album though, or album novel? Are you happy with it?
I'm very happy with it, yes, and I think it serves, it really serves the purpose with the novel, because the novel's about the '60s, and I just thought, well, it's just a no-brainer to put if you've got a novel about a musician in the '60s in London when all that fantastic music was going on, you've got to have an album that goes with it, and also the novel itself, although it's not up yet, but there is a version of the novel that you can get on Kindle soon, hopefully, that has musical illustrations. So if you're going to reading the book and you suddenly come across an underlined title of a piece of music, say Liszt Liebestrom number 3 or whatever, you can click on that underlined link and you'll hear the music. So instead of having pictorial illustrations, it's got musical illustrations, which go throughout the book. So if in the book, if he's talking about a really bad gig where the bass player is playing on the wrong frets or whatever, you can press on that link and you'll hear that particular piece of music that was going on at that gig. So it's and that's what I've also created as well. Was all the musical illustrations for the novel, The Rock Artist's Progress.
And where can people buy this at?
Um, you can get this on Amazon Kindle, iTunes, and a few other places as well, but basically Amazon and iTunes.
All right. And any advice for young musicians out there, Darryl?
Any advice?
Yeah.
Well, it's a really hard world to be involved in now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Music has changed so much. People aren't really playing real
I know.
instruments anymore. So
No,
what's your advice out there?
um, I'll tell you what, it's a really weird one. I'll give you a bit of advice. Never apologize for a performance, either before or after, and specifically before. If you're going to perform, you perform. If you can't perform, then you don't perform. If you're not up to it, you don't feel well enough, don't perform. But do not apologize. Well, I'm not really up to it, but I'll give it my best. Don't ever do that. You either play or you don't play. You never apologize for a performance. And that was one of the best pieces of advice that was ever given to me by one of my teachers at music college.
All right. I want to thank you, Darryl, for coming on the show. It was great talking to you.
It was really great talking to you guys. That's fantastic.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.